Welcome to ATF TV. This is Christine Zhou, reporting from London. We now talk to John Mayer in New York about this week's battle for the White House and what the election result will mean for the U.S. markets. John is Chief Investment Officer of ETF-sponsor Global X, a unit of Korea's Mirai Asset Global Investment. John, welcome to ATF TV.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, John. ATF just ran a commentary piece of yours that looked at what a Democrat sweep of the U.S. elections would mean for the markets. You wrote that the conventional wisdom is that such a sweep would be negative for economic growth. But you disagree with that view. Why is that?
I do disagree with that view. First of all, this is a really unusual cycle, as we all know. Right now, COVID cases are surging around the world, both in Europe as well as the US. And there's widespread concern about the type of economic recovery that we will experience. Now, conventional wisdom is that a blue sweep, meaning that the Democrats take the presidency as well as take the Senate, which is currently in Republican hands, that would be a negative for economic growth. And I do disagree with that. First of all, if you think about it, both parties have been embracing deficit spending. Through the COVID experience, there's been a large amount of fiscal as well as monetary stimulus that's been required. Now, under the Trump administration, the current administration, you have received for this economic stimulus because of just the high amount of unemployment and owing to the shutdown. Now, if Democrats sweep, Biden takes the presidency, the Senate is controlled by Democrats, you'll likely see a very large stimulus package in the $2 to $2.5 trillion range. That's much needed because the stimulus package that was previously passed, some of the benefits are waning. And as we're still experiencing a higher surge in COVID cases, that's going to be needed for those unemployed people to continuing purchasing through this period of time. Also, there'll be higher taxes, corporate taxes, as well as individual taxes on individuals making over $400,000 a year. What you will likely experience is a comprehensive infrastructure package to help build roads and bridges, as well as digital infrastructure, which I think is required. So I think overall, it'll be a net positive over time, although the markets may initially say, well, a Democrat in the presidency as well as controlling Congress would be a short-term negative, but a long-term positive.
You also look at the various possible scenarios if either Biden or Trump win, and also if their respective parties control the Senate and the House. Can you outline those for us, please?
Sure. So under the scenario where Biden takes the presidency and the Senate remains in the control of the Republicans, in that scenario, which would be a divided government, also the House is likely to remain with the Democrats. I would believe that this would be more of a gridlock situation. While Biden would be able to pass some things through executive order, and it could be somewhat positive for renewables, and I think it would be more difficult to get a comprehensive plan passed, particularly a stimulus package, because it would then become politicized, and a stimulus package would be needed to be passed by Congress, both the House as well as the Senate. Gridlock is not always the worst thing for the markets. In this scenario, taxes wouldn't rise. Regulations, those that could be new regulations that could be put into place by executive order would potentially be a negative, but many of those would be challenged in court by a Republican, by the Republican Party, as well as the judiciary leans conservative now in the country because of all the judges that were put in place by the Trump administration. So that would be gridlock. Again, is not the worst thing for the market. Now, I think there would be a more comprehensive plan in terms of containing COVID, and that would be positive because cases are surging in the US, and that's going to pose challenges for getting the economy back running on all cylinders, because the service portions of the economy certainly cannot get back until COVID is under control. The other scenario is if Trump wins the presidency and the Senate is still in the hands of the Republicans. In that scenario, I think you still have a problem with respect to COVID. There's not a willingness by this administration to put in a comprehensive plan in the US. And until there's a vaccine, and a vaccine that's effectively distributed throughout the US, that's going to pose a risk to the economy. But on the other side, there will be no new taxes and likely no increase in taxes and likely potentially a cut in taxes, as well as regulations will be continued to be repealed under that scenario.
Thank you. Now, the big unanswered question, the great unknown as you call it, is where does COVID go from here? How dependent do you think the US economy and the investment landscape is on the development of an effective vaccine?
Yeah, I mean, that is the biggest issue, both in the US as well as globally. Certain countries have been a lot more effective in containing COVID-19. Right now, as mentioned earlier, Europe is seeing a surge, and you're seeing various lockdowns in Europe, in different countries, some of the major countries in Europe, like France and the UK and Spain. In the US, you are seeing surges in cases in many parts of the US, particularly in the Midwest, which was not previously hit. Some of the bright spots in the US and the low positivity rates have been in New York and the New York area. New York was the hardest hit in the early stages of COVID when it hit the US. But through effective containment efforts like wearing masks, I live in New York and everybody wears a mask. The positivity rate, for the most part, except for some hotspot areas, is about a little over 1%. I think in the US overall, it's about 6.5%, which is pretty high. So until we can contain it, that's going to cause a challenge for service sectors, particularly the leisure and entertainment areas. And those areas cannot get back to full employment. Obviously, they're effectively closed in certain parts of the U.S. And until there's an effective vaccine, and potentially we'll hear about vaccines in the next few weeks, I think you won't hear anything before tomorrow. The U.S. election is tomorrow, starts tomorrow morning. But the next question is, how is that distributed? And I think that's going to be very challenging because some of the vaccines have to be distributed at very cold temperatures. And the vaccines have been politicized to a certain extent. So some people aren't going to be willing to take them at first until they believe that they are safe. So that's going to be a challenge. So I see distribution the biggest challenge.
And lastly, John, who do you think is going to win tomorrow? Will it be Biden or Trump?
Well, the pollsters were wrong in 2016. The common belief was that Hillary Clinton would win the presidency. She did win the popular vote. The expected spread was 3 percentage points, and she won by 2.1. So nationally, the pollsters were not that off. Remember, in the US, it's not determined by the popular vote. It's determined by the Electoral College. So you have to actually look to state level polling, and that was not correct in 2016, particularly in the battleground states in the US, which is the Midwest. I'm hedging here. The polls, they say the polls have improved, and they've corrected for the errors that they experienced in 2016. On that basis, almost every simulation says that Biden will win the presidency, and that there's a good chance that the Senate will flip from Republican to Democratic control. If you look at the betting markets are predicting a Biden presidency in the 60 to 65% range. So I'm going to go with Biden. A long answer to getting to Biden.
It's a tough question. Thank you for joining us
Yeah.
today, though, John. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you all for watching. To read John's story, please head to asiatimesfinancial.com for the world's best news on Asian markets, economies, and more. I'm Christine Zhou reporting for ATF TV from London.